All right, well, this next panel, obviously I'm sitting up here because I'm the moderator, so I'm doing triple duty for this event today. It's all about Asian business women, and we need more of them, but we have 4 excellent examples of some successful business stories from various backgrounds. So I'm excited to get this conversation started. Are people still wanting to come in? Yeah, are we okay? Okay. All right, well then let me do some introductions here. So I'm gonna do it a little bit out of order so they're not seated in the order that I'm introducing them. But Edith.
Oh, thank you.
Right here. Edith Yeung is a venture capitalist, technology executive, and a China internet expert. Edith is a general partner at Race Capital, an early stage Silicon Valley venture capital fund investing in all things infrastructure. Edith is the seed investor in Solana. That's been dubbed as one of the best venture investments of all time. Wow. Lightning Network, Agora, Placer, Rapid API, and 60 other amazing startups. So if you want a venture capitalist to, invest in your business, talk to her. Okay, next is Abigail Hing at the very end. Abigail works at the intersection of storytelling and technology. She is a New York Times best-selling author, women in tech leader specializing in AI, fascinating subject, a filmmaker as well as a mother of 2. She writes and speaks about tech, AI ethics, women's leadership, implicit bias, equity, and transforming culture. All right. Next, we have Kristy Kim right there, next to Edith. So Kristy, she immigrated to the States from South Korea, and even though she had a good job, educated, she could not get a loan when she got here because she had no credit history, and she thought that was ridiculous. So she started her own business. She founded Tomo Credit to help immigrants and young people, get a loan without a credit history. So she started in 2019, highly successful. We had an interesting talk last night we're going to get into. I think that's an interesting issue. So, okay. And then we have Ridhi Tariyal. And Ridhi and I met last night at the speaker's dinner. Ridhi started something that's called NextGen Jane. And this is really a fascinating company that looks into female medical issues, sexual health, but also something really, really interesting when it comes to the use of menstrual blood. Now, don't cringe, you guys, because, this is something that we all need to be very open about, but it's fascinating what she and her co-founder have done and they're looking into. And it's something that when it comes to women's health, it is really largely ignored and not enough resources are put towards women's health and sexuality. So this is something we're also going to get into. And I'm going to read one thing about your Instagram description. Wow. I love it. I looked it up this morning. So Ridhi, she says, CEO and co-founder NextGen Jane. I done been through a whole lot, trial, tribulation, but I know, God, is this mic on? So we're going to explain why she says that because we kind of talked about this last night. So welcome to all of you. I want this to just be an organic conversation. I didn't really prepare any formal questions because my style of having interviews or moderating a panel is very organic. So the first thing I think we all want to know is when it comes to starting a business or running a business, it's hard enough, right? No matter if you're a male or female. But I think the challenges are even greater when you are up against the stereotypes that exist of Asian women, right? Again, I think a lot of us grew up thinking we had to keep our head down, stay silent, and all of that, but all of us are proving that that is absolutely not the case. But how did you find your voice, and how did you find the courage to do what you did and continue to do what you do? So, Ridhi, why don't I start with you right here?
Sure. I mean, it's a good segue from the quote that you just read, which, if you guys are fans of Kendrick Lamar, is just a lyric of his. And I think that it really spoke to me. And, it was in the age of, I think when I started I think it's my Twitter bio. Is it my Instagram bio?
Instagram.
Back in the day when you had to be clever and well, there was all this pressure to make it succinct, and I thought it was a good synthesis of the fact that when you're an entrepreneur, 99% of startups fail. It is hard, right? And so to find your meaning and a through line that keeps you going, it's almost faith-based. And so, there's a line in there to say, I've been through a lot, but I know God. And for me, that was just sort of a call to the fact that if you really believe in what you're doing, sort of the external factors that are impediments and challenges they all become manageable. Because you have sort of a organizing principle and a central line that is driving you that is beyond these challenges.
And you still have that.
I hope so.
Yeah, so it's been sort of steadfast throughout for you.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that you bring up faith, because I would just inject this. I thought I was going to go to medical school just like every Asian kid. And I hated science and math. Not just hated it, I just couldn't do it. And so sophomore year in college, I decided, okay, what do I want to do? And I literally heard a voice say, you will go into broadcast journalism. It was a voice as clear as day. And I feel like it was faith that was driving me towards that. When you have that foundation, it's very hard to give that up, isn't it? Yeah, all right. Edith.
My mother she doesn't think I have a real job. Because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor.
And she doesn't understand probably what you really do,
no
right?
idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
Okay.
And I think, on this topic, I bring up my mother because we have really, really good relationship. Okay. And then for the longest time, most of the new companies, or I quit my corporate job when I turned 30 years old. I actually didn't. We might have talked about it last year.
Maybe, yeah.
I actually didn't tell her I quit my job.
No, she would have killed you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, this is many years ago, I just sort of pretend I'm still working in a corporate job, but really I started a new business, and I just want to explore a life outside of working for someone.
Yeah.
And so about 2 years later, I went back to Hong Kong, which is where I'm originally from. I was speaking at something. I realized I can't really lie anymore. and then I told her, I started this thing, and actually I joined a startup, and she thought, I thought that you were either pregnant or on drugged. Thank God, it wasn't as bad as
so it was
she
a
thought.
relief to her. Okay.
That's right. And so I think, just to start with, starting businesses and whatnot, for me, it's really about sort of proving it to her I'm doing something legitimate. Mm-hmm. It's less about, oh my God, I have this vision or this or that. It's really about, first off, not to take yourself too seriously, but in life, you get to a point where you want to be in place where you're contributing, you're learning something new, and then you're doing something you believe is so much bigger than yourself.
Right.
And along the way, if your attitude really is about giving as much as possible, by nature, you will start to meet new friends. Mm-hmm. And you are really the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Right. And slowly you just sort of learn, I can be this role in this place beyond just a daughter. Mm. And by the way, I think being a daughter is great. At the same time, you guys know what I mean, Asian mother like to tell you certain things, you shouldn't do this and this and this.
No, I wouldn't know that at
so
all.
Therefore, I gave her no details, and then I think she's okay with it.
Okay, that's good. She's accepted it. All right. Yeah. Okay, Kristy.
Yeah, it's kind of similar in a way that I have really great relationship with my mom. Maybe that's common themes. If you're a mother, have a good relationship with your daughters. Maybe we all have. But my mom, she was entrepreneur. So my dad and my mom, they are both small business owners in South Korea. So for me, growing up, I just thought that, of course women work, because my mom always worked, as I remember. And my dad one day told me that, hey, Kristy, I'm not jealous of doctors and lawyers because I truly love what I do.
Oh, wow.
And he said that if you're a doctor, every day you have to interact with sick people. If you're a lawyer, every day you have to deal with criminals. And for me, my dad speaking, I get to travel, I get to talk business, I get to build a team, I get to hire people, I get to build a culture the way I want. So the way how he described his work as an entrepreneur was really cool. And I thought that I want to do something that I really love, just like how my parents fell into doing what they really love. So for me, throughout my career, it was all about just finding what I love to do. So my first job was investment banking. I thought that I loved numbers and finance. But after banking, I realized that, oh, I want to work with startups because my banking job was M&A. So I got to see founders who were in the process of selling their own companies. And I thought that the process is really nice. I get to meet them and see them. And I feel like, oh, they're just like normal, everyday people, not special, like not like superpower. So I thought that maybe I would work at a startup or eventually start my own company. So I joined a startup. And after startup, long story short, I ended up starting my own company. So for me, it was never like, oh, I want to start my own company. It was all about, I just want to find something that I feel really passionate about and also meaningful.
You and Ridhi have the same sort of story out of frustration because what was happening culturally or, you know, with the credit and then with women's sexual health, that's what drove you to start your companies in many ways. So we're going to get into that in a second. Okay, Abigail.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. And there's like 5 more seats up here, so people should come and sit down. It says
Yeah,
reserved for
you should.
speakers, but we're here. So for me, I think it was a combination of understanding the role of implicit bias and seeing for other Asian American women and other women what I couldn't see for myself at first. And then people who believed in me, who kind of raised me up. And so for the first one, I was about maybe 10 years into my corporate world when I told my manager that I wanted to manage. And he was very confused. He said, "You mean people?" He did not perceive me as a leader. And that was the first time I realized, oh, I thought I was a leader. I went to Harvard, I trained as a leader, I did leadership roles and things, and he did not see me that way. But I also felt insecure. So when he wasn't sure, then I wasn't sure. But then once my girlfriends and I started opening up to each other, hey, I'm having a hard time getting promoted. I haven't gotten promoted in 10 years. I seem to be screwing up. Once we started hearing that from each other, like, wait, you were the smartest girl in our class in college. How could you not be getting promoted? So we could see it for each other where we couldn't see it for ourselves because we were too insecure. And so that's when things first changed for me. We started coaching each other. Here's how you talk about your promotion, like why your title is important because it gives you more credibility with your counterparts and it reflects the role that you're already playing. And so that was an important step. And second, I worked in venture capital where I found that the women who came in were asked a different set of questions than the men. They were asked to bring the numbers to back up the dreams that they had, whereas a lot of the men who came in, the response was, these guys, they don't know what they're doing yet, but they're smart, they're going to figure it out, because the venture capitalists would recognize themselves there. Yeah. So again, seeing all that, I realized, so then when I moved my career into Hollywood, and I started encountering that implicit bias again, because I actually think Hollywood is behind Silicon Valley, I recognized it a lot faster. I'm like, oh, here it is again. This person doesn't believe I can do it because he's never seen someone like me as a producer or someone like me as a director or an author even. So I'm glad that I had those experiences and I'm glad I had a community around me to support me through them.
Yeah, yeah. You bring up something really interesting about how women are perceived versus men. And I've read so many of these different studies to compare notes. And one of the most interesting studies I saw was that when women look at a job listing, they feel like they have to check every box to qualify. And if they don't feel like they qualify and check every box, they won't apply, right? Men, they studied, they'll be like, 50%, sure, I'm gonna apply. I think I'll get the job. Right? And this is not to bash men, but this is the programming that we are all raised with, right? Every single one of us. Doesn't matter what cultural background. It's a male-female thing of programming. And I always say to my students especially, we have to be deprogrammed and then reprogrammed. And that's not an easy thing. So it's great to see these women up here who have been able to crack the code to a certain extent. But that leads me to my next question. Can you give me specific examples of you butting up against that kind of resistance or you feeling like you had to do double the amount of work? Or how did you get around some of these barriers to get to where you are today? And I'm sure all of us still struggle with this, on a continuous basis. So who would like to start?
So I can add to what you just mentioned, that I thought about why, especially in BC, like BC-backed startups, why there are not many female founders. I think number one reason is that by the nature of startup, you are starting from nothing, like 0 to 1. So in the beginning, of course, you have nothing. But you have to convince the other people that, hey, I am capable of creating something, and here's the plan. So in the very beginning, it's really about selling your vision. Maybe you can chime in how you approach the companies when you evaluate. So I think in the beginning, I think that less women are getting funded or less women are trying, because in the beginning, it can be extra harder. But I think once you have your numbers, actually now that I've been building the company over 5 years now, I feel like it's getting easier to convince other investors and other external parties, because now I have numbers, so I can easily just show it to them. But in the very beginning, I think that's where we need some extra resilience and extra support, or just to power through, because in the beginning, it can be a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To echo what Kristy just said, I think as somebody who actually invests, a lot of time is less. Sure, like I'm kind of like that too. So I like to triple prepare with some sort of number. I talk about that, but I think from an investor point of view, when we look at someone, it's really about sort of, does this person, particularly we focus on early stage, which means that when we invest, most of the time there's no product, there's nothing to look at. It's really about this person. And so to understand what's the reason why you want to build this company, to this person actually will do whatever it takes to make things happen. And sometimes, like myself included, sometimes I will catch myself being a little bit too humble. I think all of us have our own story, but maybe we just don't take ourselves seriously enough. Mm-hmm. So that I really have a lot of great mentor, but really in general, like we all of us need to kind of craft our own story, where you are more than qualified to be here to build this company, and you need to have that attitude. And so when you have nothing,
but here's the thing: I think a lot of women suffer from imposter syndrome. Right? We feel like we're not enough. We have to be more. And I think there's always this issue of not valuing ourselves enough and saying, like, this is what I'm bringing to the table. But we sometimes doubt that much more.
So the way to sort of get around it is, if you really want to solve this problem, or you have to turn the table around, you are doing the society injustice if you are not working on this. Right. So don't take it too seriously, but start to watch the people who, whatever industry or you want to focus on, how do they talk? Copy them. and less about, I can't do it. Forget it. Like I'm also sort of introvert, extrovert. So I really want to get this done, so I'm extrovert, I have to do this. Mm-hmm. So don't put it because of yourself. Don't get in your own way. Get out of your own way. If you really wanted to get something done, just get over it. Yes, I'm all scared anyway, but so is everybody else.
Yeah.
So on that note, I remember in our seed deck, so in the very beginning, I told investors that, do you know SoFi? Do you know some other fintech companies that are well known? And I kind of looked at their deck, earlier version of their pitch deck, and then I just got some idea and then made my deck super aggressive that we are going to grow 10x, 20x, right? And then when I met someone, and he used to work at SoFi, he was an early employee at SoFi, Korean guy, and when I met him later, and he's like, I wanted to meet you because I was wondering, she is crazy to make this deck. This lady is crazy enough to copy the crazy metrics that he used to solve that crazy when he was making the deck. So I'm like, I just need to do what you guys did, and you were able to sell it. Yeah. I should be able to sell it too.
Good for you. Yeah. Ridhi, you have such an interesting story about the fact that you were getting into this business that was very unusual, right? And you ran into a lot of resistance. We
Yeah.
talked about that last night. So share with us what you have been through and still go through to a certain extent because of the nature of your business and then trying to get support.
For sure. I mean, I think that one comment I'll make is, my journey started when I was trying to get information about my own reproductive health from my doctor. And as you can imagine, it's always hard to advocate for yourself, even if you're very vocal or what have you, because you're sort of in a unfortunate power dynamic, right? Your doctor has all of the power. They can say yes or no to any of your requests. And I remember asking her questions like, and it was a woman, so
It was a woman.
It was a woman.
Okay.
And asking her questions like, if I want to have kids in about 5 years, I'm not ready now. How do I figure out, questions about my health, how to get there? What do I have to do? And she was basically very bluntly, there's nothing I can tell you. There's nothing you can access. And she really said that the standard line that I'm going to get from anybody who asks is if you are concerned about your ability to have kids, the number one way to resolve that is to try to have kids now. And it was just a really bizarre response from her doctor.
Okay.
She knew I wasn't even in a partnership, so I was like, you have two problems you have to now solve. So one was in terms of the motivation to keep going is you find these intractable challenges, and they're not necessarily even society's intractable
What's the
challenges.
name of this doctor?
Oh, no. Yeah. She's actually a friendly. I cannot expose her. She's one of the good guys, and that's the unfortunate thing is she's one of the good guys, and she doesn't have the tools to help me either. But in terms of for solving society's problems, you're going to end up solving like your problems. That's what's going to drive you the most because you're like, I can't go to the doctor to answer the questions I need. What's anybody else going to be doing? So that's one in terms of like motivating to the question that you want to really take on. As May has mentioned, the way that we decided to take it on is to say you should be able to mail in your tampon. This is essentially cells that are shed naturally from your body and find out information. There's data in there. You should be able to find out about your reproductive health very directly. And as you can imagine, most of venture capital is predominantly male. And so initially pitching this idea and having these conversations.
Yeah, mail in your tampon. I'm sure the guys were like, yeah, no, I'm out, I mean, yeah.
Over drinks at some point, Stephen and I, my co-founder, can tell you stories about what the early pitches were like. I mean, he and I would pitch together, my male co-founders in the crowd, and we would be talking about menstruation, and the male investors would not be looking at me, and they'd be asking him questions about menstruation. And I was like, you can ask him. He knows the answers, but shouldn't you be talking to me? Or there were people that they couldn't even say the word. There were investors who said, during that time of the month where a woman does, what she does. And really at that point I was like, do you know what she does? And so my biggest takeaway from we've been doing this for 10 years right now, my biggest takeaway for anybody who is going through this process, because it's always a funnel, most people get rejected, right? You're gonna get more no's than you are yeses. For women in particular, and then in women's health, and then if you're doing anything to do with menstruation, even more so, is stop trying to convert people into believers, just find the people who already believe. And so I'm spending a lot of energy being like, don't you see what a big market women are? Don't you see how much buying power they have? Don't you see how frustrated they are? To just finding the people who already got it. And that was just much more effective in raising capital.
Yeah, that's good advice. But it is funny because women, we're now the majority of the population, right? And we are making money, and we are becoming more influential. And yet, in certain areas, we're still largely ignored, especially when it comes to women's health. And that is disappointing. And also for women, we talked about this last night, women, even we have to be our own advocate, not just in business, but in health and life and, lifestyle. And yet we still sometimes prevent ourselves from speaking out and sharing and being a little bit more open about our sexual health, about our sexuality and all of these things. And I said this already, I'll say it today. Are there any kids in the audience? Okay, no. I did a show on women's sexual health, and we were talking about how women are so shy still to this day about knowing about their own bodies. And I don't know if you guys remember the Sex and the City episode when they were talking about looking at yourself with a mirror. And Charlotte was like, oh my God, no, I would never do that. And I remember talking about this on the show and a lot of us saying, no, we don't do that either. So this is something that women have to take a little bit more control of over our own bodies, right? because it sure as hell is going to change if things, keep on going the way they are in politics. We don't have to go there, but you guys all know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, Abigail, I want to go to you because I think for you, in terms of dealing with Hollywood, like you mentioned, in a different way, still a lot of Hollywood is still controlled by a certain, a group of people who maybe have a narrower view of what the world should look like, what representation looks like, and things like that. So I'm sure you probably met a lot of resistance too. So how did you navigate that in order to get your book turned into a movie and all of that?
Yeah, so I think it's also just drawing from those lessons, those hard lessons I learned in tech. So I, early on, before I started doing a lot of public speaking, I was invited by our China team to speak on artificial intelligence in Beijing. And I was very excited, and the China team was very excited. And then this white man in another department took the role away from me, and he gave it to a white woman from DC. And when my manager pushed back, he said, she has a resume of the other person. She has a resume that would be impressive in China. And I had to be the one to say, I'm sorry to have to say this, but I also have a resume that would be impressive in China. And it was really hard for me to say that. I'm an Asian girl trying to be modest and humble, and I had to go and I had to say that. It didn't do any good in this particular case, so I did not get that speaking opportunity. But I had allies who went to bat for me, including that manager. There was an Asian American woman in my department who then gave me a role to speak on artificial intelligence at a women's conference. And I guess, so then this man had no jurisdiction over that women's conference, and so I did go and give this talk. There was no one else to compete with me for it. And that was my first opportunity. And so I would subsequently go on to speak on AI around the world. And then I had this idea to do an AI podcast. And someone was like, oh, you should go talk to this executive. He's thinking about this too. This is early, this is like 2020. I want to do an artificial intelligence podcast just to share the learnings about this really cool technology that I was interested in. So I talked to the exec, we had a great conversation. And then my mentor said, does he understand that you want to co-host this podcast with him? I'm like, well, isn't that obvious? Like, I'm the substantive person in this relationship. He actually doesn't know anything about AI. And so she said, no, you need to check. And so I checked. And he was like, no, you're going to run the calendar, secure the speakers, and develop the content for me.
No.
And this is actually after my book had come out. It was a New York Times bestseller. I had spoken on national TV. And I still did not have the courage to push back. I still thought maybe like I could
why?
beg.
What was the thought process?
What is the thought process? Because I think that's like, it's ridiculous. Like when I look at it now, I'm like, I cannot believe that I was there. I think it had to do with the imposter syndrome and not ever seeing anyone like me in those roles. Like, and he was more senior than I was in the company. So I was gonna go back and beg to like, in exchange for doing all that work, that I could co-host one episode on ethics and AI, which was like my space because I have a legal background as well. And I went to my mentor and she's like, no, that's not going to work. So I went back and I turned him down. And I thought I was just going to move on. But then the company gave me the official Intel AI podcast all to myself. And the exec actually was fired a little while later. And it was the biggest lesson of my life because I had entire ownership over the whole podcast, complete control over the calendar, the speakers, and then I crushed it. Like I brought on Yeung Kun, who's the head of the AI group at Meta, Facebook at the time, Andrew Ng, who's like the godfather of deep learning. I had a congresswoman, a US congresswoman who like held the first hearings on artificial intelligence. And I crushed it, and I didn't know that I could crush it. And so I think that was an important lesson for me.
Did you, though, feel extra pressure to crush it? Like you really, like you felt like, oh my God, if I don't crush it, then that's it, Because the reason I ask this is that I do think that women put a lot more pressure on ourselves to be successful because we think we get one shot.
And I think we often do just get one shot.
Yeah. That's why I say that.
So now I think the narrative that I try to encourage us to think about is like I have seen men lose billions of dollars and then they get promoted. And the reason they get promoted is they have now learned a really important lesson. They spent $1 billion learning a very important lesson. They've grown a lot and they're ready to take the next step. And so I think that's where we have to like forgive ourselves. We should be allowed to make mistakes, terrible mistakes, and keep going. As long as we had that growth mindset and we had the raw talent and the skills and the team, like we don't have to be perfect to get
Yeah.
the next opportunity. And then that means like we lay off on ourselves and then we lay off on each other too.
Well, that's a great segue into the question that I was about to ask about failure. We're all so afraid of failure, especially with our upbringing, right? You know, we have to like stay on track. We have to do well and everything. But failure is the most valuable lesson that you can learn, right? That is how you grow. That is how you mature. That is sometimes you need to be humbled by that, right? And then you kind of can excel from that point. So what kind of failures have you guys gone through that have been really significant in terms of shaping who you are, not just as a businesswoman, but as just a person? Kristy.
Yeah, I can go. By the way, Nick, you can sit next to Lyle. My boyfriend just came late.
Oh, okay. Yeah, here, there's a seat. There's a seat. Yep. Yeah.
So for me, what I'm very thankful for my parents is that because I'm the first generation, so I came here by myself, so my parents couldn't come here with me because they are small business owners. They had to stay in South Korea. And I remember I tried to convince my parents to come, right? Because as a kid, I was like 10, 11, so I thought that why can we all go together and then like live in these big houses, right? And like American like the movies. And then, but my dad is like, well, like what kind of job what can I do in America? My dad is like, I have to focus building the company in South Korea because he was just starting out. He started his company when he was 35. And he had to like make things work for himself without much support. So for me, as the first generation person from South Korea, I thought that my parents had certain expectations, but when I spoke with them, actually they were telling me that, oh, just try anything and everything you want. Doesn't work out, come back to Korea. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's their way of like, you know, like encouraging me that, okay, you try, you shoot for the moon because you are all the way in the Bay Area in San Francisco by yourself and you chose that and then you just, you know, just go for your high streams and just go shoot for the moon, but it doesn't work out, you can always come back home. So for me, that really made me feel safe whenever I try something new. And I'm still not going back home yet. So
Wait,
fingers
Kristy,
crossed.
When you came, you were 11, you said?
Yeah.
Were you staying with family? Who were you with?
So first, it was supposed to be just like one summer, just
Okay.
for fun. And then I fell in love. It was Portland, Oregon. So I loved spending time like outside. I loved Portland. So I told my parents that can I stay like 1 month more? Can I stay longer? And ended up like going back and forth a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Who wants to go next about their failures?
Crickets.
Yeah.
Go again.
Abigail.
So I have no overnight success with the novel. My novel Love Boat Taipei, which came out in January 2020, is now a film on Paramount Plus and Amazon Prime and Apple TV. That book was my 5th novel. So I actually wrote 4 novels on the way there that I had to bury along the way. And I think that's one thing I love about Silicon Valley is that we do understand here that risk and failure those are learning experiences along the way. Like usually there's often a failed startup or 2 before you get to the one that makes sense. And so I think those 5 novels were my training ground. It was also time before Crazy Rich Asians and Hamilton opened up the world and opened up the gates like for diverse stories to find general audiences. So those 5 novels, it was hard along the way, but I am glad that in the end that Love Boat Taipei was the one that came out first because it came out strong and then it enabled me to publish more books. So now I have 6 more books on the way.
6?
More than that actually, but yeah. 6 named ones.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay, good for you. Because not easy even just writing 1 book. So yeah. Okay. Ridhi.
I have a comment on failure. I wonder if it's the flip side of failure is shame. And I wonder if that's especially relevant in Asian communities. And so I speak from a South Asian background, and I have parents who grew up in India. And actually, I was born and raised in India. And there's a lot of shame associated with failure,
Yes.
and it's sometimes a motivating factor. Like it drives you, right? That in America, I feel like the culture around the narrative around failure is different. It is sort of very, you learn from it and you use it for greater, achievements and what have you, versus in my family in particular, failure was a bad thing. Like, oh, you had to hide it, and you shouldn't talk about it, and so that motivated you to make sure you didn't fail. And I think that one of the ways that this worked in my life is one of my failures was the first startup that I did not launch. I wasn't able to raise money for it. I tried for an entire year, and felt it deeply. I was like deeply wounded by it, and tried to understand what had happened. And both things happened. One, I was really motivated to make sure that I stayed the track and tried to fundraise for another startup so I could prove to myself and my family and the people who are watching me that it was okay, that I was still able to do it. And in the sort of American narrative, I did learn from the first failure, and it was useful. And I learned all the ways not to pitch your startup and who to pitch to, and was able to fundraise for the second one.
Right. Yeah, I will share a little bit too. As a broadcast journalist, I was on the fast track for many, many years. Did not have any failure, just was like skyrocketing in my career. But then I did get demoted once when I was a young anchor in Dayton, Ohio. They did not like the fact that this young Asian woman was promoted to be a co-anchor with this older white male anchor who had been a solo anchor for many, many years. So he did not want to share the limelight. He actually counted how many words he read per newscast versus how many I read. And when I had more, he would go to the news director and complain. Yes, very petty.
Wow.
But he finally succeeded in getting me out of the anchor chair. So his campaign of getting me demoted worked. I was humiliated, right? It's that kind of humiliation, especially when you're on camera, is like so embarrassing, and lost the face as an Asian. My parents, I was just so afraid of like being just seen as this failure. But it did motivate me. Failure is motivating, right? It motivated me to get off my ass and get the hell out of that station and go on. And guess what? That actually catapulted my career, because I ended up getting recruited to go work for NHK in Japan, which then led to CNN, and that led to my whole international sort of news broadcasting. But yeah, I think we're all so afraid to fail because, again, that's the societal programming that I keep talking about, right? It's shame, I think. Oftentimes it is associated with shame, which it shouldn't be.
Yeah. So I started my investing career 10 years ago in 2014. And so I started with a $10 million fund. And anyway, for the first 4 years, when you invest, by the way, like investing even as a fund manager really is your own business in some sense. And you really don't know, like, did you make the good decision? And most of the startup which we focus on is very early. Think about it, right? Uber took 12 years to go IPO. You really have no idea if any of your decision, how come all my companies sucked? And by the way, for most, in particular for early stage, like 95% of the companies fail. Right. So every time any of these companies shut down, I'm kind of like I'm responsible for the people who invested in my fund, right? And mind that, like most first-time VCs, probably like another half or 80% don't have a second fund.
Yeah.
So for the first few years, I'm like, do I really know what I'm doing? No idea. And of course, in 2018, I'm very, very thankful I got to invest in Solana. But that was after 4 years of very, very uncomfortable. Do I even qualify to do this? And the only thing that you can show for is the result. And so in some sense, I think the most important thing is we just have to kind of treat it. You need to self-talk. Whatever the bad things happen on a day-to-day is just part of life, part of the journey.
Right.
And if after 4 years, if I basically tell myself I'm not even qualified to do this, that will be the end of it. So don't take yourself out of the game.
Yeah.
And you have to continue to look in the mirror and like, you can do this.
Yeah, you got to be your own cheerleader oftentimes, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about what it is, the difference between female leadership and male leadership when it comes to business, right? Back in the day, women were always accused of being too emotional, right? Couldn't handle the pressure and all of that. And so, but now they're doing studies where actually women often make better leaders, right? They're better at teamwork. They're more empathetic. Things like that. So would love to hear your sort of experiences and your thoughts on these new narratives we're hearing about female leadership. We still haven't had a female president, crying out loud, in in America. So, but yeah, so we haven't gotten there. Slowly we're getting there. So if you could share your thoughts on that.
I have a quick comment on it, which is that I think that these studies have been around for a while now, and you've seen them all referenced in LinkedIn and your community groups. You share them with your friends, where you're like, women are better investment managers. They like wealth managers. They're better decision makers. All of the things. They're better stewards. And yet it's not translating into actual changes in society.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if it's not a rational thing, it's an emotional thing. So that you can put out 50 studies saying that women are better managers of money, but if they're not the ones who are being allocated the funds,
right.
What's the use of the studies?
Right. No, that's why I bring up the study. We see all this data in these studies, but nothing is changing that dramatically. So yeah, what do you think, Edith?
I agree. Yeah. But one other thing I think for all of us is about telling stories. In addition to, by the way, being a female fund manager these days, sort of the sovereign wealth or what do you call this, endowment are starting to actually have sort of the DEI, the diversity, wanted to allocate just for women fund managers. There started to be some change, or there are more and more like women-focused funds that. But then the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't want to be a charity. Like I'm good. Like I'm a great fund manager. So my first one, returned 7.16 DPI, means 7 times of my fund. Woo, that's really good. But why do I have to be the DEI category? What the hell, right? So in some sense, I think it's an attitude. These guys are expert in AI, expert in finance, expert in healthcare. We're the top, not charity. We're really great at what we do, and we have to tell that story.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm gonna play the devil's advocate.
Sure.
But unfortunately, society as a whole, they still see you first as Asian and women, right? Those are two minorities, right? And we still have to fight that, right? We can't change that. I always say when it comes to racism, I can't change the color of my skin, right? There's nothing I can do about that. So therefore, somehow we have to rise above it and fight back on it, and to change the narrative. Easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah.
So on that note, that's exactly why we need more examples.
Yes.
Right, because we can
100%.
only imagine what we see many times.
Yeah.
So I had one intern from UC Berkeley, a college intern. So I have hired so many interns over the past 5 years or so, probably more than 100 from top universities all over the U.S. Because I thought that so my company Tomo, we teach people how to build credit score in the U.S. And many times students don't know what credit score means. I didn't know when I was in college. And we tried to help them understand, and we thought that it would be really good to have college interns so we can get their thinking, how should we explain credit to other students? What makes sense to you? So we have hired many interns, and one specific intern from Berkeley, he was so great. He would just do anything and everything the company needs, and very self-motivated. And I offered him a job after internship, but he said that, I want to try investment banking before trying to start up. But long story short, I convinced him, so he chose Tomo and didn't go into investment banking. And 2 years later, we were having conversation, and my colleague asked him, how is it like working at Tomo? Is it as you expected, working as startup full time? And then I think she asked something, how is it like working for Kristy? And then he told her that, oh, she is exactly what I thought the startup founder would be. Do you guys follow? So what he told my colleague is that in his opinion, I, as a CEO, is exactly what he thought a startup CEO would be.
Wow.
Because I'm the only CEO he has ever interacted
Right.
with. So I'm sample of one. So in his mind, oh yeah, female boss, female CEO,
That's
sample
totally
of one,
normal.
doing well, great, right? So for me, it's like, oh yeah, that's why it's so important to have more female in leadership positions and managers. Then our kids will just say, oh yeah, I will be like that.
Right. Right. It's not an anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just like representation in media, right? We were talking about that in one of the other panels. It's if you see more faces that look like you, the Jilly doll too, all of these examples, we see it, we're more exposed to it, it just becomes normal, right? It's not this, oh my God, there's a movie with all Asians. Wow, So that's what we have to do. It's all about the representation in all fields, right? So Abigail,
No,
your
yeah,
thoughts on
I
that?
think that was what I would have added is the narrative, right? So that's where I see my calling is to help show Asian female leaders, show non-traditional leaders, and really that we play all walks of life. We play all roles in all roles of society. There's a diversity in our community, and I think I see that as my work, and I'm grateful to all of you to helping me to do that work.
Yeah. All right, I would love to open it up to questions because this is a chance for you to ask these brilliant minds whatever you'd like. So there's one right back there. You can just speak up if you can.
Hi, thank you for this talk. It's really inspiring. My question is, as the daughter of immigrants, working class single mother, my biggest fear is economic insecurity because I grew up poor, and just in entrepreneurship, you need to be risk happy, you need to have capital. And as someone who is just so scared of being poor again and like getting past that scarcity mentality, I was wondering if you have any suggestions or tips to break through that and pursue your passions, but also know that you're not going to go back to where you started from and those feelings of just being scared of being
Insecurity, yeah.
insecurity again.
Yeah, great question. Who would like to take that on?
I can start. I think that's very real. I'm also the daughter of immigrants, and my father grew up very poor in Indonesia. My mother grew up in a wealthy family, so it was very disparate. But as an artist, it's very hard to make money in the arts. And what I tell my kids is you have to be able to support yourself. And so I actually did both for many years. I think you can do both. I actually left my corporate job 2.5 years to focus full-time on the content creation. But I did that very slowly and very carefully. And I did it at a point when I felt like I actually did it when we decided to greenlight the film, and I had more sustainable projects in the works. But I think that there are ways that you can hedge your bets so that you're making sure that you support your family while still giving yourself space to pursue those passions. And over time, my balance would shift. I think when I had young kids, I knew that's when I needed more stability, and so I did take less risk then. And now that my kids are older, I felt less of that pressure, and now I'm able to do more of what I'm doing now.
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I would say I'm very sympathetic to that. I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about is so many founders are wealthy because you have to be. And it's so irritating that if you don't have a trust fund, you can't stand up a business. And the levers that I know to press. So I grew up very poor. I didn't have money to have a safety net should I fail or what have you. I get asked the same question of my mentors when I was starting my journey, and I was probed to say, well, do you have someone that can help, like a partner, to help balance that? And I didn't, so I was like, no. The other sort of constraint is if you're a single mom, you have someone that now is an obligation, and so you have to take that into consideration, and that makes it more challenging 100%. The one lever that I was able to use, short of get a contracting gig, but that just means you have two jobs: the job that where you have stable income, and the job that you're trying to capitalize for, is reducing your need, what you need. And it's hard and it's not sustainable in the long term, but a lot of entrepreneurs I know will do the like, I'm not going out, I am living with roommates, I am, my personal cash burn is going to be very low for a year until I'm able to reach a proof point where I can actually raise capital to pay for myself.
So for me, the immediate thought that I had was that, okay, what if it works out, right? So I think you never know the outcome, but definitely the mindset is like, okay, what if it works out? Because you want to provide the best for your kids or your family down the road. And I think it's a kind of like, it's hard, I know that, but even I do that to myself in a way to try to like mentally like train myself that like, okay, think of the positive scenario because I don't have control anyway, but in my mind, I wanna like envision and think of more of a scenario when things work out, less about not work out. And then because you said, what if it doesn't work out and then go back to the before. But my point is go back to the before and you learned the skill sets and you tried your best. I'm pretty sure that along the journey you learn something. So it's not like failure, you learn nothing. During the journey, I'm pretty sure that you might come up with a new business idea or you find new skill sets that you want to apply. Maybe it can help you to get a better job next time. So I think that it's not like all or nothing. And many times people who try to start a company, no matter it works out or not, in the next chapter, many times they are better off.
Thanks for the question. Other questions right here.
Hi, thank you so much. That was really inspiring. As you guys have all kind of touched on, Kristy, you sort of mentioned this just in what you said, but when you guys hit those kind of mental roadblocks, or it could be external, it could be just you guys are in a rut or whatever, what are the things that you say to coach yourself out of that? Like what are the kind of the sayings or the things that you say that kind of constantly get you through those tough moments to continue and like get you to, I guess, the next step and continue growing? How do you get out of that?
I have two simple things. If it's a public speaking like this one, this is friendly audience, right? But when I'm in non-friendly audience, I always remind myself that, okay, word needs to hear what I need to say. A word needs my opinion because I'm like example of one. We are here all like immigrant and Asian, but when I'm in the setup that I'm the only Asian or I'm the only female, I just try to think that my experience is unique and valuable. That's what I tell myself. And when it comes to fundraising, I always say, in the world, so much money, billions of money out there. I just have to go grab it.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
All right.
I actually have an app for that. I don't know if it's my friend Joe was telling me about it. There's an app which I really it's called I Am, and it just keeps doing push notification to say really positive words to me. Seriously.
Affirmation, positive affirmation.
Like every day, like you can adjust it to how many you want. It's like, for example, is that I am patient and passionate with myself. Seriously.
She does, yes.
Okay.
And I was like, you are worth it. Like, I'm so happy.
Do you feel like there's a difference in how much you believe in what the app tells you versus your internal dialogue? Or do you feel like it feels very similar in terms of the power it generates in you?
I think I constantly have like this Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
Like even though I'm like, yeah, I feel really good, but then sometimes I'm still,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, I
So
think we all do.
it's a struggle at all time, and I don't think there's any app would solve that problem.
Yeah.
I have an analog solution to her digital solution, which is a girlfriend's hype group text chat. And so get your 5 best girlfriends, and just they'll know when you put out the flag to be like, I feel bad today. It's like, you're the best. And I love compliments from a bot, but when it comes from a human, it feels much better.
And then also I do one last thing is. You're not going to say it out loud, but you should like walk away from negative friends.
Toxicity, yeah.
Just slowly roll out of,
Yeah.
like, just.
And I'll tell you, as you get older, like me, it's just like, you're like, yeah, I'm done. I am done. And you walk away because you realize that you don't have as much time anymore, right? So how do you want to spend your time?
Yeah.
You got to have some quality, and so that means getting rid of toxic people, toxic situations, toxic jobs, toxic relationships, all of that. It does matter. Yeah.
The bar with the app, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Shot.
Have a couple of shots, yes. Okay, how about just one last question, because we are running out of time. Oh, you're so enthusiastic in the white hat, yes, yes.
Hi. So I do have a two-pronged question. And I first want to thank you guys for showing up so beautifully and like as your whole selves and touching on the multifacets of like the human experience and how that ties into your business as well. So my first question is, how do you balance like occupying the space that you know you deserve and continue to seek, while not taking up so much space that you're not bulldozing conversations as you're like seeking those, higher quality connections and information too?
What's wrong with bulldozing conversation? I'm just kidding. Okay, yes, who would like to take that?
I think it's to master the art of asking questions. And it's very easy, really, is like why, what, who, how long. And you are the best conversationalist if you can just ask questions. And they will think, oh my God, this person is just so great to talk to, but you said nothing. That's really how you engage with whoever you wanted to engage. And then I think it doesn't matter what position you're at, you can always offer some help. I don't know what it is, but in my case is, or maybe in their case will be, would you like to come speak at my podcast? Well, people love that. And this is something. There's always something that you can give and ask questions.
I think I'm always looking for alignment, because I think with almost everyone I speak to, there's some way that we can partner up or support each other. And so for me, the fun part of those conversations is trying to unlock that. So like with my work, what I'm trying to do is increase representation of diverse peoples and medias, and to try to bridge people from different experiences and different backgrounds. And my ultimate goal is a more reconciled world. And so with each conversation, with each person, I figure out like, okay, how can we build that together? And how can we reach your goals at the same time?
Yep.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we all want to feel connected, right? It's all about connection, and even though we have all this technology now that's supposed to connect us, it's making us even more disconnected. So the human touch, human interaction, face-to-face interaction, conversation, listening, asking questions. I'm a journalist, that's what I do for a living. So those are all things that will bring us together and unify us and create better understanding. Right now, we live in such a divided, polarized world, and that is lacking. So let's all take it upon ourselves to connect on a deeper level that way. So, well, that just brings us to the end of this great panel discussion. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, everyone.